This week on Marketing Freed, I'm joined by marketing and advertising consultant Jim O'Connor. Before going freelance under the brand name Stories That Sell, Jim spent time at agencies such as Young & Rubicam and Saatchi & Saatchi, and in 2017 wrote a book, The Authority Guide to Creating Brand Stories That Sell. In this episode of the podcast, Jim takes us through the processes and tactics he uses to uncover and communicate an organization's brand story. Jim, welcome. Great to have you on the podcast.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, it's great to see you again. Look, just to kick things off and for the audience, could you maybe think back across your career and pick out a few highlights that stand out to you, anything you're particularly proud of having worked on or a campaign and what it's achieved?
I think, but oddly enough, the highlight was ended up as a bit of a disaster, really. But I was on the verge of getting laid off by Young and Rubicam. The new creative director came along and got rid of half the creative department, and he said he was just about to get rid of me. But then he came into our office one day and he said, "Oh, do you want to go to Queensland?" And he sent me and my art director to Queensland for 2 weeks just to drink rum, which was a highlight for me. It was, the idea was to do a 60-second cinema commercial to launch a new rum to take on Bacardi. And it was just not the best 2 weeks of my life, but it was pretty good. That was, as work goes, that was probably the best.
That is important. That was important research. You've really got to get under the skin of the product.
Yeah, that's what it was about. It was actually, you had to discover research the Australian attitude to drinking. It was just fantastic.
Brilliant.
Then we worked on it for a year, but the market kind of disappeared. A bit like now, it was sort of inflationary, and the market for luxury drinks, premium drinks, just disappeared. But I got my 2 weeks in Queensland. But I think the real thing, the highlight for me actually is when you solve a really difficult problem. That's for me is what gives me the buzz. I mean, some people it's winning awards or I don't know what floats their boat, but for me it's a private internal thing really. You given a problem, you think you've got that something to do with that, And the best one probably was I ended up going to California with a little tiny design agency. I mean, there's only like him and about 2 others really. But this really big one of the big software company in Palo Alto, but they were bankrolled by all the major banks in Wall Street to develop a new risk management software. And they got 3 or 4 of the biggest global ad agencies to pitch for it. But just as a complete wild card, they invited us to go over, thinking we were in London, but we were in Bath. We were out, it was the middle of nowhere, really. We went over there and we spent a whole day being briefed. It was 45-minute sessions for all different people in a room, literally covered in whiteboard with theorems written all over it. It was incredibly intimidating, and I didn't understand a word of what they were saying. And that night, we had to present to the board the next morning, and we realized what we'd come over with was completely hopeless. And in the night, I woke up and I thought, we can't explain this product. It's too complicated. But it's risk management software. And if you don't have this, you're going to be in real trouble. So I just came up with some headlines that preyed on the fear of, risk managers, I think are probably nervous people, because of risk management. And I just showed them these lines on the sort of days in stationery with the biro in the board meeting, and just look on their faces was just fantastic. And the line that really got it was, "It's a dog-eat-dog world. Which dog do you want to be?" Had nothing about the software. It's just like, if you haven't got this software, people are going to be eating you alive.
I remember that example.
Yeah, they just ran a whole campaign. And that was a highlight for me. It was just like pulling a rabbit out of a bag, really. It was right at the last minute.
I remember that example from your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great example. I do remember it from the book. And perhaps we'll come back to that later, because I think it's a really interesting part of the process, from coming up with the broad messaging that you're trying to achieve for the client, and then distilling it down into something that it communicates everything, but in quite a short, pithy way that's easy for people to understand and remember.
Yeah, that's the key, really. Yeah, that's what the job is,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, your book is about helping businesses to create brand stories that sell. Could you describe what a brand story is?
Yeah, no, we talked about this before, and I've been thinking about it a lot because it's a really big question. And I think the key word is story, actually, and people in marketing, it's a buzzword, it has been for years, really. And people go, oh yeah, it's all about telling stories. But they never explain what a story is, and it makes me suspect they don't really know what a story is. And they're just repeating it 'cause it's a buzzword. And everyone goes, oh yeah, it's about stories. Well, what is a story? You know? And a story, actually, I mean, I think if you're going to write stories, it helps to know what one is, to understand it. And it's a sequence of events, but which are connected by causes. It's like a line of dominoes falling over. Ian Forster explained, he said, for example, the king died, then the queen died. Well, that's not a story. The story is the king died, then the queen died of grief. And it's one thing causing another, and there's emotion involved as well. And I think that's what a brand and a story has heroes and villains and challenges. You know, you think of Lord of the Rings or any great story. And a brand story is where your brand is the hero, and it's got challenges to solve, whether that's analyzing risk or cutting costs or, I don't know, helping you lose weight or whatever. And so that's what you have to, you turn your product or service into the hero and then show it solving things. You show the product in action, which is, again, being kind of academic drama. It's character in action. So you show your product or service in action and winning, you know. But the really clever brand stories, the ones that really work, are the ones that the consumer has their own story, not a brand story, their own internal narrative and the story they put out to people. It's when they adopt your brand story as their story. That's the really clever thing, because they like what your brand story is and they use that to signify the type of person they are. And it's sort of like Nike or whatever is all about just about being an overcomer or an achiever. And a load of people just love wearing Nike because it meshes with their story. It tells a story about them that they just love. And I think that's the difference between a great brand story and just a not such great brand story, when people adopt it themselves. So that's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So one of the things I really like about your book is that you walk the reader through really quite a logical flow of the steps to take in order to create, first of all, I suppose a position for a brand, and then once that's established, then moving on to how you can go about communicating that to your market. One of the first activities that you recommend is just to list all the features and benefits that you could associate or attribute to a product or a service. How would you decide what features and benefits you end up focusing on?
Yeah, well, but there is a logical process to just rewind. I mean, I'm not sure everyone uses a logical process. I think the misapprehension or the misconception is just inspiration comes in from somewhere. But I think if you're a professional, that's completely the opposite of what happens. There was a book written in the 1940s called Technique for Producing Ideas by a copywriter who watched how Henry Ford had invented the production line. And he wrote this book in Chicago for some automobile executives, actually. And he said that you can have a production line for ideas exactly how you have a production line for Ford cars. And the first thing is you list the features, you list the benefits, but also you put those together. But also, crucial thing is you've got a target audience. It's not just what have I got to say, it's what do they want to hear. And also you've got to align that with the market and the competition. There's no point saying what they want to hear if someone's already saying it. You've got to find a different angle or different subject, a different set of features and benefits from your key competitors. And really what you do, you move those four things around. That's how you, what you're trying to do is to find features that are unique to your product, and which appeal to the target audience and which you can genuinely promise. And then you're in the right area. But then you've got to express it in a really interesting way, because even then you're probably in the same area as quite a few other people. And that's what the trick there is, to walk away from it. And I started watching Mad Men recently. I've always avoided watching that, but there's a classic bit in the first episode. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but Don Draper's got to think of a new idea for Lucky Strike cigarettes, which And there's a whole lot of research just come out from Reader's Digest saying they give you cancer. So they've got this major problem. And he's in a bar, the first minute, I think, of the series, he's in a bar trying to work out exactly what you were just saying, features, benefits. And he asked the barman over, actually, and asked for his opinion. But then what he does, he can't solve it. And he goes and sleeps with his girlfriend. And the point is, and David Ogilvy would say, well, you go and drink a quart of claret or something. Everyone had a different way of doing it, but we take a long walk. You feed your head and then you walk away and you let the subconscious do it. And that's when people think, oh, you just sit there and wait for an idea. Well, they're missing the point. You've done all that process work beforehand.
Yeah, it's all noodling away in the back of your mind, isn't it? And
you've lined it.
I know this
up.
is. Yeah, absolutely. I know that I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but I'm quite an avid user of word games like Wordle, and then you sort of expand that into Quordle, where you've got to solve 4 of them, and then there's Octurdle, and then you solve 8 of them at once, and. When I get stumped with a problem, I've got some of the letters and it's all a jumble. It is remarkable how many times I can go away, make myself a cup of tea, forget about it. And I don't know, later when I'm waiting to pick up my daughter from gymnastics in the car, I'll have a look at it again and the answer comes immediately. But you've removed yourself from trying to think about it and then the answer becomes apparent.
Yeah, you've got to switch the logical mind off, Yeah. But you've got to do all that. Yeah.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned about trying to find, or the importance of finding not just your features and benefits, but it's got to fit that Venn diagram of also not what you have to offer and what you're credible about, but actually what your audience care about, and ideally what your competitors don't, and what they don't offer. How do you go about finding that out?
Well, I think hopefully the brief should give you most of that, to be honest. But often it doesn't. So you just online, really. I mean, you just go and look at what the competitors are doing online, and you just, with the audience, I think it's slightly empathetic, actually. I don't know that I don't think it's not, for me, it's not about data. It's trying to imagine I'm that person. And you don't think of a group of people, you think of one person. And you just put yourself in their shoes and you try and imagine how they think and feel and what problem they've got that the product might solve and what their feelings are. It's more an imagination process than a data kind of process for me anyway. Seems to work, because I found often a lot of data will tell you what you already kind of knew anyway.
I suppose the concern with relying on data is if the data exists, then presumably other people have access to that same data as well. And so you're not going to end up with anything unique because of it. It's often
you look at
sort of passing comment.
Yeah. We look at banks. So they've all got the data saying people want the bank to be customer centric and friendly and warm. And they all have the same 6 words on their kind of values or whatever. So I think they all end up exactly the same place because they all do exactly the same products, same interest rate. Yeah, you can't ignore the data, but it's not going to solve the problem for you. You've got to go beyond that. And I think and a lot of people in marketing, they spend all the time. I've just seen a post on LinkedIn. Obviously, I won't say who it was, but somebody saying, I reckon I've read more biographies of great business leaders than anyone else. Okay. But actually, perhaps you should have a bit more variety of reading. It's, if you read lots of different novels, novels put you into the heart and soul of all kinds of different people. And I go down the pub. I find the pubs really useful and talk to people who I don't even like, who are just very different from me, because that's when you learn stuff. And you've got as a copywriter, you've got a really broad waveband of people, of people. To sort of just get how they think and feel. And, I didn't vote for Brexit, but 30 people in my pub did vote for Brexit. And it's really, you need to talk to them. You need to listen, Why did they vote for Brexit?
Yeah, there's the saying about creativity is actually about combining existing ideas in new combinations.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, you can't combine things if you've got an empty brain.
In fact,
it's stuff. And I think that people are going around with a narrow waveband of stuff in their mind, or even not much stuff at all. And they're trying to have ideas, and it's just not going to work because you can't make many connections, can you? Because you're scraping around for stuff to connect. So you're having a
exactly, and the more ideas you have, actually, it becomes exponential, doesn't it? It's kind of the square of the number of ideas you have is the possibility of the number.
Yeah. When I was working in London at Young Rubicam, I'd go on the train. I commuted from Bristol to Paddington every day. And I get on the train, there were some really bright people on there commuting from the city. There was a lawyer as well, really top barrister. And I would just, and they were busy. They were working on the train. I wasn't really, when I was working, I used to look out the window, because that's what my work was trying to think. And there's an architect as well. And I would just give them my problem. And so they'd say, what are you working on today? And I go, oh God, I've got to think of something for the Bingo Association of Great Britain to make people go to bingo halls, And I remember this lawyer who just came up, he just came up with this great idea, because they think of it totally differently. So it's just, you don't know where you're going to get the idea from, but if you have an active, be curious is incredibly important, I think,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. All right. So look, if we're following the process that you mentioned and you cover in your book, you've understood your features and benefits. You know your audience really well. You know what they care about. You know who your closest competitors are and what they offer and how they're presenting themselves to the market. You then move on to defining your proposition. Can you talk a bit about what a good proposition looks like, what it includes?
Yeah. I mean, and this is the key. This is where most things fall down because you've really got to think. I think Henry Ford said thinking is the hardest work a man ever does or a person ever does. That's why so few people are willing to do it. And a proposition, it's a promise. What promise are you going to make to the consumer? But it's got to be really simple. And when I worked at Saatchi & Saatchi, they had this mantra, which was brutal simplicity of thought. And when you put a brief into the creative department, it had to be one sentence. And there was no words like and or anything in it. It had to be one thought. It had to be single-minded. And it was the single most motivating and differentiating thing you can say about this product or service. So it's got to be different in competition. It's got to be motivating. And it's got to be really just one sentence. And that's the hard thing, is most people want to say two or three things. And that's when it gets confusing, So you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask a question as to whether you think, if you think across your career, has it actually got harder and harder to come up with something that is truly differentiating?
Yeah, definitely. Because I've been doing it a long time. It's like, I look back at when I started, it was history. So I'm joking apart. I think, I started in the 80s and I was looking back at learning from people who did it in the 60s. And they weren't, if you looked, I don't know, lawnmowers, there was only probably two kind of types of lawnmower. There's the hover ones, or the ones that rolled along. And so it was much easier. They were to find a point of difference. But now, I think I looked up how many potato products there are kind of in Tesco's. I do that occasionally. It's about 100. There's chips and waffles and it's the same in every market. The markets are just so utterly stuffed with products and services. There's virtually no point of difference. And I think this is actually a really key point that I read a book right at the beginning, which I look at regularly. It's on the shelf behind me, the Craft of Copywriting. And the guy said there's only two types. When you're a copywriter, there's only two types of advertisement. One's where there's something to say, and one's where there's nothing to say. And nowadays there's virtually no product that's got anything to say because someone's already saying it. And then that's where you've got to be creative, because you've got to come up with some way of saying pretty much the same thing, but in a totally different way. And the way I tend to do it is, and most people kind of, what they do, they focus on the features, especially business owners, because it's their baby, they're absorbed by their business and their product, which they've developed. But they don't realize that's of the least interest to other people. People aren't interested in your product. They're interested in themselves. And you've got to get over the features, really. and talk about the benefits in a way that no one else is talking about them.
You give a really nice example in the book about actually the power of how you communicate, the story that you tell, the words, the language that you use. That can be a significant point of difference. And you give a great example of in the Bible. You've got the life of Jesus as told by 4 different disciples, and then you've got films like The Passion of the Christ and Ben-Hur and Life of Brian, and they're all utterly different from each other. So I suppose a question for you is actually, is there a part of the process or how do you go about making sure that the tone, the way you're telling the story fits with your proposition and your target audience?
Yeah, I think I kind of lost my way with the last point. Really, I was talking too much. I think when you find you haven't got anything remarkable to say about the product, what I do is I flip straight into what does the customer want to hear, and I think that's actually, if you analyze most advertising now, that's what people have done. They've ignored the product completely. I mean, I was looking at Dove soap the other day. I've got to do a talk to the Women's Institute next week, which I'm pretty worried about. And I thought, well, what product might they be interested in? Well, Dove soap. They talk about, they don't talk about the soap at all. They've got this campaign for real beauty, and it's saying, you're really beautiful if you've got grey hair. You're really beautiful if you're overweight. It's making people feel great about themselves. It's got nothing to do with soap at all. So I think and that goes back to your point about tone. The tone is just dictated by what the people want to hear and perhaps the way they want to hear it. But there's all sorts of nuances because you've got a choice. You could either, I don't know if tone's even the right word really, but do you aim for someone's head? Do you have a logical approach? Give them a logical argument? Or do you aim for the heart and you go for their emotions? Or do you go for outright humor and try and make people laugh? Or do you go for wit, which is, I think, what's called a smile in the mind? So it's not a laugh, but you go, that's clever. Like, yeah, and you just make people like the product because you're giving them a smile. So I think the tone goes back to the consumer, I think. It's what's going to win their heart and mind.
Yeah. And I think it's important to mention it's kind of got to be both. There's an author that I read quite a lot of, a guy called Dave Trott, and he's written some excellent books. And his career in Adland goes back, I think, to certainly the 70s.
Even longer than mine.
Earlier. Yeah. But he tells a story of, it's really, I suppose, a reflection of the state of a lot of the ads that you see today. He likens it to salads. And the example he gives is you can have a salad and it can be a bowl of lettuce leaves and it can be kind of dry and uninspiring and a bit grueling to munch your way through for lunchtime. It's healthy and all that, but it's not an especially enjoyable experience. But you can make it more pleasant. You can make it more enjoyable by putting some salad cream on it. And what he feels a lot of brands are doing with ads currently is they've actually excluded all of the nutrition. They've removed all of the salad, which is kind of the facts of the information they're trying to communicate. And it's just spoonful after spoonful of emotion. But actually, you're not really left any better educated about what it is that you're going to be getting, but you might feel something. You might feel something towards the brand. And I think there does need to be that balance of the two.
Yeah, you are definitely. And I mean, that's a brilliant way of expressing it. I mean, I think of it similarly. Fast food, McDonald's, it's like a burger, they're just churning out these burgers, which are all sort of this bread that's like cardboard. And, there's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing right with it either. It takes it's got a burger in it, it's got some mayonnaise, it's got a bun, it's got some lettuce, and it's all measured and everything. So you can't criticize it, but it's just completely tasteless and there's no nutrition. I think there was that saying, wasn't there, about presidential campaign in America of somebody went, "Where's the meat?" And the idea being there was no policy, if you like, in this person's campaign, and no content on the way they said, "Where's the meat?" Which I think probably was a slogan for a burger originally, but where's the meat in most advertising today? It's all desperate for grabbing attention, or it's ladling on emotion. And I keep hearing people who've got no interest in advertising other than they're the target audience going, "Well, what was that ad about? What was that for?" I've got no idea what what it was.
Yeah. Often wins awards, but is actually totally ineffectual at changing
Yeah, and
people's behaviours.
it's very creative because it's got nothing to do with the content at all, So creative,
Yeah.
it's way out there,
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that point. And so you've kind of got to the stage now. We've defined who we are, what we offer, who our audience is, how we're different. We've actually got the tone of voice and our messaging right. I think the real skill that you've been able to demonstrate in the book is then distilling that all down into a succinct message. And if I think about my skill set, I'd find it, I think, relatively easy with enough time and effort to write out a page-long argument about a particular product or service and why it's better than something else, and put some emotion in there and, but actually distilling it down into some short, memorable, catchy messages that is easy to understand. That's the magic, isn't it? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, well, it is magic. And I think actually, I think last time we talked, you mentioned a line for a campsite that I did. It was so good, I can't remember it. No,
free range camping.
Free range camping, wasn't it?
Love it.
But what's interesting there is actually, I'll put my hand up and go, it wasn't my line. It goes back to what we were saying earlier, is talking to people. We were sat in the campsite, drinking cider because it was in Cheddar, so it was sunset. And the woman who actually did the booking, she lived in a caravan on the site and just did the bookings and stuff. She came up with it. She just said it. It's just like, oh, it's great here. It was just like, it's just like free range camping. That one I didn't think of, but I wouldn't have got it if I hadn't been doing what I do, which is just listen to everybody. And again, being on that train going to London, often some of the best ideas came from the lawyer, the architect, or whatever. But then a lot of ideas are generally it's me coming up with it. And I think people talk about it as being a kind of magic or something, but I don't know how you do it really. I hesitate to use this word because it sounds a bit arrogant, but it's talent. Nobody ever talks about talent anymore, but they used to people like Dave Trotman that used to talk about it. Certain people have got it and certain people haven't. And I mean, I've just got this knack of being able to do that, come up with a little quirky kind of set of words, and really quite quickly as well. I don't know quite where it comes from, but it's just the kind of brain I've got, really.
I guess it's one of these things that gets easy with experience as well. I mean, it's devilishly hard to ask a marketing generalist to do that if that's the first and only time they've ever done it in their career. It's probably not going to be brilliant the first time around, but if you can engage with a specialist, that's what they do, and they've been doing it for years, you would expect the end result.
Also, I suppose I've learned off people. I suppose I've learned over, we've been doing it 45 years or whatever. So there's tricks that you learn, certain tricks and techniques. And I mean, the book, Craft to Copyright, he says that the how technique. So how to do that, how to do blah, 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 why to do such and such, or when to do. And you look at kind of campaigns, then you go, I think Cinzano or Martini had the Martini moment or whatever. So that's a spin on the when moment. The who might be having a celebrity or, there's just tricks and ways of doing it. But the other crucial thing is I think people overlook people talk so much about copywriting, but they never kind of mention, and I've worked with copywriters and worked with copywriting agencies. They all think it's about words and they only think about words. Well, that's absolutely nuts actually, because at least half of it is the picture. With an ad, it's the picture that does most of the communication. And the trick is to have the words that spark off the picture. You see loads of ads these days. All they do is they come up with a headline and then they stick a picture of the person in they think is the target audience, as if to sort of signify, hey, you look like this. You're related to this person. You need to read this headline. I mean, it's just so lazy and crass. The great ads have a picture and a headline that probably initially you don't quite get the connection, and then you suddenly get it. And there's a spark. It's like a spark plug. You've got to get the gap between the two. It's just right and stimulate enough curiosity, and it kind of jumps across. So
there's definitely I was just going to say, it's definitely Yeah, it's definitely a change though that you've seen you can notice in the ads that are running now versus how they were a few decades ago. Where if you cast your mind back, you might expect some of the great ads to be, I don't know, 2/3 dedicated to the image that grabs your attention, but at least a third of the page is actually dedicated to the copy that it explains a bit more about it. So they've grabbed your attention, but then it's about convincing you and sort of speaking to your heart and your soul. And nowadays, you're right, it's often a catchy image and maybe a catchy headline, but you're then kind of pointed to a website or left to your own devices. And it feels like that's less effective at actually engaging people at that moment than
Yeah, I think there's just so many reasons for this, but part of it is I think you go back 40 years or something, ad agencies used to get 15% commission on the media, which meant they were making a lot of money. So they could hire people like me, and they could hire a copywriter and an art director to sit in a room for a week thinking up ideas because they were making enough money to do it. But then the media fragmented, you came up with media independence. That 15% disappeared. So the creative departments were disappeared really. And so ads have been done really quickly now. And we've gone back to a stage where the people doing the pictures and the words probably not even in the same room anymore. And in the old days, you came up with an idea and you took an actual photograph, you commissioned a photographer and you directed the photograph to tell the story. Now you just go on Getty and you find a picture that's, oh, that's kind of all right. There's a picture of a telephone or a laptop or something. And that's why the advertising just doesn't work anymore, because they're trying to do it on the cheap. They're trying to do it, this whole movement to do stuff. Technology allows you to do stuff quicker and more efficiently. Well, yeah, it does. You can have one bloke on a laptop can produce an ad in half an hour and do something that took a week or more, but it's crap because there's no discussion. There's no someone going, I've got a better idea, or what if we did this and that? And, and then it goes to the director who goes, yeah, why don't you flip that around? Someone like Dave Trott, that's where he earns his money, because he goes, yeah, what you're missing here is this. And you've got this whole team of people, but technology means that one person on their own can do it really quickly. And the client goes, oh, that's cheap. Great. Okay.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that is also a result of measuring the wrong things as well, particularly now that a load of advertising happens online. It's really easy to measure things like click-through rate, but that for many brands, that's of no consequence. You kind of don't care if the ad got loads of clicks for many brands.
Listen, partly from what you said before, I'm thinking about issues you'd raised before. If you compare 4 ads that are all crap, you're just measuring crap against crap, aren't you? If you didn't measure quite so much, but you really spent some time refining a really good idea, you didn't test it, you're probably better off than 4 ads where you go, oh, I know that one's the best one. Yeah, it's the best of the worst. There's a great saying, was that average is the best of the worst of the best, and the cream of the crap. And we just got a load of average advertising that people are measuring to death. And it's going, why are you bothering? It's not differentiated. It's not motivating. It's badly produced. And it's cheap and it's quick. And the media, you're on Facebook, so the media doesn't cost you anything. So Bob's your uncle. Then the brand manager goes and gets another job. And what a great job they did in the last. They keep moving every 9 months, the chain or whatever,
Yeah. How many clicks?
I'm really cynical here, but I mean, people don't call this stuff out anymore. And I look on LinkedIn, he says, everyone's just congratulating everybody, being chummy with everybody. And I'm so proud to be working with so-and-so, and they're such a great chap or whatever. And it's just this sort of chummy club of mediocrity. So I don't say that on LinkedIn because I don't want to upset everybody. I mean, I've got friends, but I think sometimes you've got to call it out and say, there's a great Oscar Wilde, one of his plays was a character. Somebody said he knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. And I think we've got a world of that. Everyone's got the data, they've got the price, they know what things cost. We've just forgotten what the value is, of doing it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. When we caught up previously, you spoke about something other than ads often being bland and ineffective. Something else that you see clients frequently getting wrong is they actually leave the message to the last moment. So you gave an example of websites being created and then someone coming to you and saying, right, well, we need someone to fill it with copy, on you go. That sounds like a devilish challenge.
Well, it's not a challenge for me. In a way, it makes my job easier, really, because I think, oh, well, there's just a few pages I've got to write. I'll write something to fill it. If that's what you want, makes my job really easy. Doesn't make a good brand story, though, because they've kind of put me in a box before I even start, you know? So I'll just fill the box. And that's really not, it's not, I do care about what I do, but sometimes they make it so difficult for you. The job's almost done before they get you involved. But what they should do is, well, what they do is they go, oh, we need a website. We'll get a web designer, and then the web designer does the template or whatever, and they have a color palette and a mood board and all this sort of stuff, and then they have a wireframe, and then it's kind of, oh, what's going in these spaces, And then I come along and I can fill the spaces in, and if I try and change what they've already done, say, well, actually, I think you need another page here, or this, I think we could do this on the homepage. In terms of brand story, they go, oh, well, no, you can't do that because it's not going to fit with that. Oh, all right then.
Yeah, it's putting the cart before the horse, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah. You see it a lot. Well, I see it a lot, But I don't think really big companies don't do that. But it's the sort of smaller and medium-sized ones which are more reactive, possibly,
But even then, I think even when a website begins its life with a lot of care and attention, a lot of thought given as to what you're trying to communicate and to who and why and what actions you'd like them to take at each stage, over time, inevitably it just drifts anyway. And what might have been perfect and fit for purpose 2 years ago, often when you revisit it, it's just become a sort of horrible amalgamation of stuff that's just been bolted on and happened. And then in its entirety, it no longer works. And it needs that constant, well, not constant, but a regular refresh actually as to what you're trying to communicate and why, and just a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah. I was asked by a management consultancy. I'm not going to name any names here for sort of slightly obvious reasons, but they got 6 copywriters. They were asked by this major utility company, a massive utility company, to get 6 copywriters to, in 6 weeks, come up with a new website. And they had like 6 different websites, this utility company. And they had like, not exactly, it was almost 1,000 pages of stuff. And they wanted that in 6 weeks, putting into kind of, well, maybe 300, But halfway through the project, after 3 weeks, right from the start, I said, look, you've got to tell me what the pages are, because I can't write if I don't know what the subject of the page is. After 3 weeks, halfway through the project, they still hadn't told me or any of their copywriters. They couldn't tell us. They had all these project managers managing it, but no one could take the decision. And then they said, well, the project's lost momentum and you're all laid off, It was just, it was sort of hilarious because but that's what you're saying really is, a website can just get totally out of control. And it needs somebody to be totally brutal, not brutal simplicity of thought, just go, you know what, let's just trash the whole lot and start again. Because this is just a mess,
Sorry, I was on mute then. Yeah, absolutely right. Look, I'm conscious of time, Jim, and thank you so much for.
Yeah. Right.
We're doing good, but I just want to leave with a couple of parting thoughts. Something I'm asking every guest is for a book recommendation to do with marketing, and maybe a point about what it's taught you or why it's relevant.
I think, well, you see behind me, there's loads of books. The one I'd pick was one I read, first of all, it's really thin. It's a tiny little thick, it's only that thick, Purple Cow by Seth Godin. And the first time I read it, I thought, oh, it's a bit superficial and a bit kind of trendy. And then I read it again and just thought, actually, it didn't tell me anything I didn't know, but it just reminded me that the whole point is when you see cows, they all look the same. But the purple cow will be really worth noting. It would be remarkable. And he's saying that your brand story has to be a purple cow. It's got to be remarkable. Otherwise, it's just a complete waste of time. And he just comes up with loads of case studies, and it's very readable. But the point is, you've just got to be remarkable. And I think people put in so much effort to all sorts of other things like research and data analysis and user experience, all the rest of it. And unless you've got a remarkable product or a remarkable brand story or a remarkable way of expressing it, it's just a waste of time. You're just going to pouring money and resources into it and tweaking stuff. And having a good story just isn't good enough. That's how he ends the book. It's got to be absolutely brilliant, And it made me think I did actually have to do a campaign on a purple cow once when I was at Young and Rubicam. I mean, I worked at Young and Rubicam. They were the biggest ad agency in the world at that time. So every day you've got a different project. It's a massive brand. And Sushard Chocolate has a brand called Milka.
It's Milka.
Yeah, it's a purple cow, And it was like, can you it was a TV commercial for sell this chocolate. It kind of wasn't necessarily a proper job. It was just unspeculative, but it was like, they paid us a load of money. Could you just do some ideas to sort of keep them happy, to justify our fee or whatever. And I was copywriter being the art director, came up with, what can we do with this cow? It's this sacred cow, literally. It's the Swiss, sort of worship this cow. And we came up with, there's a song by Deep Purple called The Purple People Eater. And we came up with, we used that song and we'd have this cow going around eating people. And I suppose it's crazy, but a purple cow for milk and chocolate just was a bit boring, really, with a mountain behind it and a milkmaid or whatever. What are we going to do that's remarkable? So we thought, let's kick it up a gear. And the cow's running around eating people. And the line was, eat it before it eats you. And then we had to present this. And then somebody said, all right, you're going to have to go upstairs to the sort of one of the big chairmen from America or vice president or something. And I remember he was called Joe DiDeo. And I thought, God, Joe of God. And we went into this room full of clocks. It was a really surreal experience, thinking he's not going to like this, And we had an animatic and we showed him and he just long paused and he went, so let me get this. The cow eats the people. And we went, yeah. He said, oh, good. Okay. I think it should show it eating more people. Oh, okay. Right. It never went anywhere because it was just, and that's what happens actually with most of the good ideas I ever did or remarkable ideas. They never go anywhere. People go, oh yeah, we love it, but you wait for the but. And I think it's especially true now. If they can't justify it with data or research, they're not going to have the guts to do it,
Yeah.
Whereas
Totally
back
right.
in the 60s and 70s, they did. People like Dave Trott, they would be able to do that,
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point to finish with. Thank you very much. Jim, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I've enjoyed all our conversations leading up to this point. So thank you very much for all of your time and sharing your knowledge and experience. For anyone who wants to connect with you after the podcast, how can they find you?
My website is stories.uk. So that's probably go to the website, or my email's jim at that address, stories@sell.co.uk. So that's, I'm pretty happy to talk to anybody, to be honest. I'm sort of semi-retired now and I'm kind of in the kind of help people mode, so if anyone, I'm kind of giving back, I suppose, if anyone feels I've got anything worth giving back. So I'd love to hear from people. If anyone's got any questions on that, or, great.
Perfect.
Well, thank you very much.
Really appreciate it, Jim.
Really, it's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim. Great to see you. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.